Let's check out what I'm currently reading. You can read along if you like. So, today I'm reading from Shashi Tharoor's Bookless in Baghdad, which is a collection of essays. Shashi Tharoor is a prolific writer, essayist, also a diplomat, and he wears many hats. There's so many wonderful essays in his book. Most of them have been published. He's basically just curated everything that's about reading, writing, and anything literary. I'm going to read this section in its entirety, and I shall refrain from commenting and reacting as much as I can. Revenging Rudyard, Subverting Scarlett. Every writer nurtures an idle fantasy, some more than one, a project they toss around from time to time in their minds, but never actually get around to putting down on paper. In my case, I have long wanted to exact a sort of post-colonial revenge on that arch-imperial literary figure, Rudyard Kipling, by subverting his overpraised novel Kim. Kipling's tale of the 19th century British boy who grows up for some years as an Indian, wanders the streets picking up the languages, the habits, and the insights of the land, is restored to Englishness and then returns years later as a British officer, uniquely equipped to play the great game on behalf of the Raj, seemed to me ripe for reversal. How about a novel, I mused, about an Indian boy, let us call him Mick, who as a result of an albino birth or advanced leukoderma is pale enough to pass off as a member of the melanin-deficient race that ruled us for 2 centuries. Mick might grow up in a British cantonment, be trained to rule at some British institution, like Haileybury or Camberley, imbibe the ideas and attitudes and understand the weaknesses of the colonialist, and then come back to India, rediscover his family and his roots, and turn his intimate knowledge of the oppressors against them as a fiery nationalist. I played with the notion for a while, but never got around to writing it. But Mick came back to mind the other day when a literary controversy erupted in America over the proposed publication of a novel called The Wind Done Gone, which would seek to do to Gone with the Wind what I had wanted to do to Kim. The estate of Margaret Mitchell, whose only novel, Gone with the Wind, remains one of the most successful books and movies of all time, sued to prevent the publication of The Wind Done Gone, in which the same events are narrated from the point of view of a slave, the illegitimate half-sister of Scarlett O'Hara. The author of The Wind Done Gone, Alice Randall, consciously sought to counter Mitchell's romanticized white plantation South with an account from the perspective of the enslaved blacks who made the planters' prosperity possible. The Mitchell estate succeeded only briefly in getting a federal court to block publication of The Wind Done Gone, but the issue the case raises is an intriguing one. To the extent that literature captures our imagination with a version of experience that privileges a particular point of view, isn't it desirable, even essential, that others give voice to those who are voiceless, silent, marginal, even absent in the original narrative? Tom Stoppard, the brilliantly inventive British playwright, did precisely this in his early play Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, in which he took 2 minor characters from Hamlet and in effect rewrote Shakespeare by imagining the scenes the bard left out, from the confused viewpoint of the 2 hangers-on at Elsinore. Others more recently have done similar things. John Updike also reinvented Hamlet in his recent novel Gertrude and Claudius. In Mary Riley, Valerie Martin retold Robert Louis Stevenson's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde from the point of view of the transformational doctor's maid. Herman Melville's classic Moby Dick, with the obsessive Captain Ahab, relentlessly pursuing the great white whale, underwent a feminist retelling in Senator Naslin's Ahab's Wife. Shakespeare, Melville, and Stevenson are not merely safely dead, but gone so long that copyright on their stories has expired. Which, alas for poor Miss Randall, is not yet the case with Gone with the Wind. Indeed, a hugely controversial Italian novel by Pia Pera called Lo's Diary, which reimagined the tale of Vladimir Nabokov's Lolita from the point of view of the 14-year-old nymphet, rather than that of the older man Humbert, who was Nabokov's principal protagonist, is impossible to find in English. An attempted American edition was successfully killed off by the Nabokov estate, which went to court before the book was released commercially and had every copy pulped before it could be sold. The literary executioners of authors usually claim to be acting to preserve the artistic integrity of the original work, which is certainly fair from the writer's point of view. But in the Mitchell case, the argument is more legal than literary. It seems that Mitchell estate wants to assert its exclusive right to market spin-offs of the well-known characters, and might not be averse to licensing its own version of Gone with the Wind retold from a slave's point of view. It just doesn't want someone else cashing in on the idea. The lethargy of our own courts aside, India strikes one at first glance as fertile soil for such reimaginings. When I took the liberty of reinventing the Mahabharata as a 20th century political satire in the Great Indian Novel, I rapidly learned of the many impeccable works in Indian languages that have already recast the epic, notably those that tell the tale from Draupadi's point of view, rather than through the male gaze of the Pandavas. The Ramayana of Sita's perspective might tremble on the brink of sacrilege to some, and certainly one of Ravana's would bring the Bajrang Dal onto the streets. But how about more recent classics? This is where one stops short. So much of great Indian literature was already written to subvert the established order, to challenge the ruling narrative, that such an exercise seems otiose. The Kipling view of India was already countered in the 1930s by Mulk Raj Anand's Coolie and Untouchable, and by Raja Rao's immortal Kanthapura, not to mention a host of works in Indian languages by Tagore. Premchand, Bankim Chandra Chatterjee, Subramania Bharati, and others too numerous to list, who used their writings explicitly to give a voice to those who had been marginalized by the imperial narrative. India's is already a literature of subversion, with the added distinction that the stories our great writers have told were entirely their own. They did not need to borrow from the canon in order to subvert it. We do not need to retell John Masters from the point of view of Mangal Pandey. We have already done better than John Masters ever could. So I shall put Mick to rest for good. There are more interesting stories to be told, and they are always ours to tell.